Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to 5 to Thrive Live. I'm Karolyn Gazella, and I'm here with my co-host and good friend, Dr. Lise Alschuler. Hello, Lise. How are you?
Hello, Karolyn. I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good, pretty good. I'm excited about our topic.
Me too. Yeah. Today we're going to be talking about creating our Thrive Tribe. And I love that we're talking about this because honestly, I feel like given the pace of change in the world today and just the disorientation that occurs from that, there's a lot of alienation and people that are just feeling a little disconnected and lonely, frankly. So this is a really important topic to dive into, to sort of help people, give people some ideas, some strategies, some motivations to find their peeps.
Absolutely, I agree. This is an important one. But first, let me go ahead and thank our sponsors because we love our sponsors very much. Beginning with Cetria, a patented form of glutathione clinically proven to raise blood glutathione levels. Glutathione is the master antioxidant and the body's primary defense against free radicals. It also helps support respiratory health. For more information, visit cetriaglutathione.com. Also, ProThrivers Wellness Brain. It's a product specifically for thrivers that contains cognizin for memory, focus, and attention, as well as other brain-supporting nutrients and herbs. You can find ProThrivers Wellness Brain online at pureformulas.com. There's also ProThrivers Wellness Sleep, which combines higher dose melatonin and other sleep-supporting natural ingredients specifically designed for thrivers. You can find ProThrivers Wellness Sleep also at pureformulas.com. And Dr. Ohhira's Probiotics. It's a best-selling probiotic for more than 30 years, and it contains 12 probiotic strains that are shelf-stable, so no refrigeration is required because of a unique 3-year fermentation process. It's a very effective probiotic. Learn more at drohhirasprobiotics.com. Okay, Lise, let's start with the science because that's what you and I like to do. Let's talk about the health effects of loneliness and why it's so important to have a Thrive Tribe. What does the science tell us about loneliness and how it can impact our health?
Yeah, so the research is actually quite clear on this topic, and there's a very clear association between social isolation, loneliness, and an increased risk of many health conditions that are pretty serious: heart disease, stroke, diabetes, depression, anxiety, even dementia. And actually, it's even connected with dying prematurely. In fact, there was a study that came out last year, just in 2025, from a very large, it's called a cohort study. So they followed adults in the UK over 236,000, there we go, adults. And what they found was, after following them for a number of years, is that isolation and loneliness are associated with increasing the risk of all those conditions, but also associated with about a 30% increased risk of dying prematurely after the onset of those health conditions. So in other words, if you're diagnosed with heart disease and you're lonely, your risk of dying from that heart disease is increased by about 30%. And, this is really very critical because this is very recent research, and it tells us that social isolation and loneliness are actually linked to our physical health. And this is done in a very large, very well-designed population study. So that's one piece of data we have for sure.
Yeah, and it kind of freaks me out because when you think about it, it's such a significant impact. But that's why we're going to be talking about it because I think it's really important. And here's the irony, if you want to call it. if you're feeling lonely, you're not alone. Unfortunately, according to the CDC, 1 in 3 Americans report that they feel lonely, and 1 in 4 feel they have little to no social support. In 2025, the World Health Organization estimated that loneliness was linked to about 100 deaths every hour. So this is really serious stuff. Friendships are so important, and our Thrive Tribe is so important. And Lise, you and I did an entire show on Mel Robbins' book, The Let Them Theory. So I'm going to refer to her because she says there are 3 things that dictate friendship. Now, I wouldn't use the word dictate. I think that's a little too
Hmm.
strong. I think that there are 3 things that influence friendships in our Thrive Tribe, and I'm going to add a 4th. So she says proximity. This is where I differ with her a little bit because you and I are in totally different states, and we still are close friends. Some of
Hmm.
my closest friends don't live in my state, so I
Hmm.
would disagree a little bit with that one, but I understand it. Timing is her second one. Energy is her third one. And I think I'm going to add an even more important one. The 4th one I'm adding is effort. What
Hmm.
what kind of effort are we going to make, or are we able to make, to create our Thrive Tribe? And we're going to talk about that in a lot more detail about strategies and things that we can do. But now that we've discussed loneliness, let's discuss the opposite. Let's talk a little bit about connection, which may be a more positive thing to focus on. And the science about connection is pretty clear. Feeling connected can positively impact mental, emotional, and physical health. So it's just the opposite of what loneliness is doing. Connection is the opposite. It's the treatment per se to loneliness is connection. So Lise, why do you feel connection to others is so important, and why don't you give us a strategy that people can use to start connecting with others or building their Thrive Tribe?
Hmm. So I think that connection is important because, well, the obvious thing, right? So you're just interacting with another human being, and you're recognizing or having the experience of being more than just yourself in the world. So there is that on face value. But I think on a deeper level, when we connect with another human being, we are gaining a sense of self in context. And that that's a very deep statement, which means a kind of a lot to a lot of people. For me, when I say that, I mean that we are gaining a sense of where we exist relative to time, to space, to our lineage, to our future, and to the world around us. So it gives us context. It gives us a sense of import and meaning and significance to really everything and anything else that we're doing and feeling. So all of that happens really just with even one conversation or one friendship or just another connection with a human being. So I think it's really important just to help us regain a sense of self.
Hmm.
And there's so many strategies, and we'll get to some of these, but I guess I want to just start by saying that it's not necessarily easy for some people who feel isolated and lonely, just go out and connect with others. And there's been a lot of studies that have found that people who combine lots of different strategies together are more likely to create connections. So in other words, if you exercise, for example, and then you combine with the exercise connection, you're more likely to feel connected and in fact to connect. So let's say you like to do yoga, you could choose to do yoga in a class with other people. So now you're doing what you already like to do, and you're doing it in the context of social connection. So that's been really confirmed in a lot of different studies. And I think, Carolyn, you and I have talked about this sort of piggybacking type behavior in other contexts too, but it's a really easier way. It's like taking a half step forward to gain a lot of benefit.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, some of my strategies are similar to that. I think that it can be hard work to avoid the temptation to isolate. So some of my strategies are similar to yours because if you find things that you like to do, and then find ways of meeting people who like to do those same things, it's likely to stick. So some of my examples, getting involved with your community. I've done this by volunteering. I also periodically attend a particular meetup group. They're all over. The meetup app is all over, easy to find. The one that I like is for people over age 50, and it's very active. So we might go hiking. We did a tour of a mini donkey ranch just outside of town, and that led to a volunteer opportunity. I now volunteer at the mini donkey ranch, and I not only love the donkeys, but I've met some really wonderful people who've become close friends. You can join a club if you like to play chess, or a book club or whatever. So I think that there are a lot of ways. One thing that I would like to bring up is that I don't feel that it's merely a numbers game. Um, I've been focused on choosing wisely when I'm creating my Thrive tribes, and creating these different pockets of friends. And and they're different. Like I'll have a group of cowgirls that I hang out with, and then I'll have other friends that I hike with or whatever. But it's not a numbers game for me, and it's about choosing wisely. So I would say a piece of advice may be trying not to choose friends out of desperation because you are feeling lonely. Try to focus on quality versus quantity. I think that is something that I have been focused on, and I think that is a good thing to focus on as well. So try to take the desperation component out of there, like, oh my gosh, I feel so lonely. I have to hang out with this person even though they're a jerk or whatever, even though we don't have anything in common, or it's boring, or it's whatever. So I would say choose wisely. So Lise, what additional tips do you have
Mhm.
when it comes to creating or expanding our Thrive Tribe?
So glad you brought up Mel Robbins. I'm going to bring up another thing that she mentions, but I'm going to start with a story, and that is about my mom. So my mom, as she got older, she was pretty introverted, and she became, that introversion led to pretty significant isolation. And it got quite a bit worse as she got older. But one of the things that she did, as long as she was physically able to, which was a direct counter to that isolation that she otherwise felt, was that she would go to the library, the public library, and she would go to the public library a couple of times, maybe even 3 times a week. And she would just check out books, or she would, use their computer, and all things she could do at home. But she did it to be in a community. And she, kind of started to get to know the librarians. So she would be familiar to them, and they to her. And it wasn't a friendship per se, but it was definitely a connection. And she felt like she had a place that she belonged and that welcomed her. And I went with her one time, and I realized that she had another thing which she did, which she would, on the way home, stop at a convenience store and go in and buy lotto tickets. And again, when I went in with her, the person behind the counter said, "Oh, hi, Irene, how are you today?" And it was just, again, kind of a stranger, but somebody who was familiar to her. So I realized that, that for her was a really critical way of giving her some connection, and to people that were not her friends, but definitely were part of her community. Um,
Yeah, I love that story, and I love what you're talking about here, because it's something that I wrote about in my Psychology Today column, The Healing Factor, about the health benefits of connection. And I just think it's really important that connection can be even small 1-second connections. And as you describe, she's connecting with the person behind the counter, and even just like smiling at your neighbor, or waving hello to your neighbor, or opening a door for a stranger, or these small little connections add up. And I think that they have just as much health benefit as hanging out with friends sometimes, because you can add up a lot of these small ones, and it can really have an impact. So I love that your mom did that.
mhm. And if people are feeling, a little bit brave about this, they can take it up a notch and do what Mel Mel Robbins suggests, which is she talks about when she moved to a small town and she didn't really know anybody, she would go into a coffee shop and she would go in every day and get her coffee and just say, she made a point of saying hi to somebody every day. And eventually she met a couple of people and became fast friends with at least one of them. And so I would say that the sort of challenge that one could take on is to find a coffee shop or a restaurant or someplace you would be willing to go to regularly on your own. But when you go, before you walk in, make a commitment that you're going to say hi to at least one person and maybe ask one question or give one compliment to somebody that is in that place that you're going to go, so that you have some kind of substantive interaction with them. And I'm going to borrow a phrase that I use quite a bit when I have to go into a situation where I don't know people and I'm kind of in a position where I want to meet people. I lean in with an attitude that I learned from my sister, a phrase which she calls to go with an attitude of enthusiastic curiosity. And I think in this scenario, you could go into that coffee shop or restaurant or whatever with an attitude of enthusiastic curiosity, and you're just going to say hi, or hey, I love your jacket, or wow, where's your accent from? Something that just connects you to another human being. That may or may not develop into a relationship, but at the very least, you've done something that has given you, again, just a tie to another human. And it really helps our nervous system. It helps our psyche feel like we belong.
I would agree with that. I think that's a great suggestion. I remember reading that in Mel's book too. So I would like to switch gears a little bit, if it's okay with you. And we can go back to these strategies about new friends, but do you mind if we talk a little bit about nurturing our existing Thrive tribe? Because one thing that I'm trying to look at too is it goes back to that effort, that I'm making. But one thing that I'm learning to do a little bit better is to meet people, friends and acquaintances, meet them where they're at and manage my expectations surrounding that friendship. This may not make a lot of sense to you, but let me give you an example. So I have a couple of friends who never invite me to do anything. And there was the longest time where I was like, okay, this is too one-sided. I'm over this friendship. I'm moving on. But then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, huh, these people don't initiate outings with anybody. That's just a part of their personality. And when I initiate a get together, they're all about it and they love it and everything else. So I think we have different friends who are going to interact with us differently than what we may expect or want. And I am trying to be less quick to, say, oh, well, they're not the kind of friend I want, so I'm going to move on from them. I'm trying to say, okay, and I have other friends. Here's another example. I have other friends who love to touch base. Like, I'll either get a text or a call from them every couple of days, and they're just checking in. How's your week going? How are you doing? And they love that kind of connection. And they love it when I do it, when I reach out to them on a consistent basis. Some of my other friends, we can go weeks and not talk or not, and then when we do finally get together, we pick up right where we left off. So I guess what I'm saying is all of our friends and all of our friend groups are not going to all be the same, and they may not do everything exactly how we want them to do it, but there's a place for them. And I don't know, Lise, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, actually, it makes a lot of sense. And I want to pick up on something with another example. So I think what you're getting at is to meet them where they're at, but to really go in to sort of check our expectations and our assumptions. So an example from my life is I have a very good friend who we used to be in a habit of just texting each other on our way home from work. So we kind of had a quick exchange every day, and it was really nice. And then I moved to another city about an hour and a half away, and we did that for a while. And then slowly but surely our lives have kind of taken different not turns, but we've gotten involved in different things, and the text started to drop off. And so I interpreted that to mean, oh, I'm not important to this person anymore. Our friendship is sort of maybe dissolving. And then I reached out and I found out that my friend was actually going through a really hard time and was feeling very depressed or kind of isolated herself. And so I made a whole bunch of assumptions that were
Mhm.
just completely inaccurate. And so it was a good lesson for me to just really not make assumptions. And in that situation, I think what my response, if I want to connect with her, then I reach out and connect.
Mhm. Yeah, it's that effort thing, right?
Mhm.
The other thing I wanted to talk about too is that life changes and life phases um, impact our tribe. Like I have a, people in my life now who are retiring, and these are people, myself included, who have pretty much my friend groups were my coworkers. And the people that I worked with for years and years and years, and now I don't see them. I don't work with them. So that's a change. Moving to another city, um, divorce, and losing friends through divorce is another change. Being an empty nester when your whole life revolved around your kids and your kids were your best friends, that's another change. So the reason I bring this up is because I think it's good to be aware that during certain life changes, your tribe may change, and it may change in a good way. It may change in a really uncomfortable way. But understanding that it may change and being proactive is your best bet when it comes to creating, protecting, or nurturing your Thrive tribe. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yes, absolutely. I think that life changes certainly create changes in one's own interaction and with the world and with other people, and that people's interests change, people's priorities change. So, I think that's very true. It reminds me of another tip I wanted to throw out there, which I think kind of fits in with this in a way. And that is, this takes a bit of courage for some people, but I think it's really good if you are feeling a need for a tribe and you have a friend who has some other friends and they do stuff, to just invite yourself basically, or
Hmm.
ask to be invited. Just say, hey, can I come with you guys when you next do XYZ? Because it may or may not go anywhere, and you can always preface it by saying, if I'm intruding or if it's something you guys just want to keep to yourself, that's totally fine, I get it, but if there's room, I'd love to join you. That gives you the opportunity to interact with people in a way that you have at least one person in common. And I think for people going through various life changes too, there might be somebody that you could then sort of switch a little bit of your allegiances, if you will, to a group that maybe is more reflective of where you're at.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Um, so, any more tips that you have for our listeners about creating your Thrive tribe?
I think just that, I just want to echo that it is difficult for people. I think especially the longer one is alone and the more introverted one gets, the harder it can be to reach out. And I think it's just so important to try to find one way to do one of these things that you and I have mentioned, because if the world is challenging, it's a challenging world to live in. And the more opportunity you have to at least have some ability to feel a connection and your place in this difficult world, the better. Because otherwise, just kind of hacking it out on your own, I think, is really challenging these days.
Yeah, I would agree. We need each other. As humans, we're meant to be a part of a herd, and we're meant to be surrounded by. I mean, and that's another thing too. For me too, part of my tribe are my dogs and my animals, and so that they very much are part of you know my world.
Mhm.
The other thing that I wanted to bring up is that I think we sometimes forget, when it comes to connection, that research shows that both the giver and the receiver gets benefit. So like if I smile at the checkout person and, or I say hi to my neighbor, they're also going to get benefit and I'm going to get benefit. So
Mhm.
it's a mutual thing that we can share with each other and that we can, give to each other. And I can't emphasize enough, even those small connections add up in a really, really big way.
Yeah.
So yeah, those small steps. So, and we've been talking about, small steps get big gains for years now, and it works here. It works here when it comes to connection.
Yeah, and I just want to say one other thing, which is I think some of our listeners, given the topic of our show, may have lost a loved one and they're feeling, alone, more alone than normal. Because when we're in couple, it gets easy to just rely on the partner to, have your connection in the world. And so if that partner is no longer with you, it can feel very isolating. So I think for those listeners who are in that situation, first of all, totally understand it can be like feeling like climbing the highest mountain in the world to just make any contact with anyone. But I think to your point, Karolyn, even those little things, just having a smile with somebody, just kind of doing a walk that you normally do, nodding to a person over and over, those kind of things will slowly but surely rebuild your sense of place in the world, and so important.
Yes, it really is. And thank you for bringing that up because I think it's really, really a big one. And it can be especially hard to cement those relationships when you're grieving. Grieving is challenging just in and of itself. And the last thing you're thinking of is like, oh, geez, now I have to create a new tribe. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. So, okay, I think it's time to thank our sponsors one last time, Lise, unless you have anything else you'd like to add.
Well, I want to thank our sponsors too, but I will let you, Karolyn, have the honors.
Okay, good. Well, first, Pro Thrivers Wellness Sleep and Brain Formulas, Cetria Glutathione, the superior glutathione that supports liver and immune health, and Dr. O'Hara's award-winning shelf-stable probiotic. And just remember that you can find past shows at ithriveplan.com or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We are now on well over 100 different podcast outlets, so we're out there. All you have to do is just type in 5 to Thrive Live and you will find us.
In fact, you will join. We just learned over 100,000 other people listening to the show. So there's a tribe for you right there.
Per month.
Per month.
Yes.
That's right. Well, thanks again to our sponsors. And thank you, listener, for listening. I hope you feel the love that Karolyn and I hold in our hearts for each one of you. And may you experience joy, laughter, and love. It is time to thrive. Have a great night.